Midsegment of a triangle. So a midsegment is a segment that connects the midpoints of two sides of a triangle. So for instance, on this triangle, if DE is a midsegment, then the distance from A to D is the same as the distance from D to B, and the distance from B to E is the same as the distance from E to C. So it's connecting midpoints. Now there's a little bit more information about that, and it's the midsegment theorem. So if a segment, like the one we just talked about, joins the midpoint of two sides of a triangle, then the segment is parallel to the third side and half as long. So not only do we know all of these congruences, but we also know that that midsegment is parallel to the third side. And let's just say that the distance from A to C was 10, then the distance from D to E would be 5 because it's half as long. But there's a couple of other things that we know. So since they are parallel, we could use some of our parallel line vocabulary. So these two angles would be congruent because they are corresponding, and these two angles would also be congruent because they are corresponding. So we can have a lot of information based on a midsegment. So let's solve a couple of problems. So this one says, identify all pairs of parallel segments. So if you look at our triangle, we know that D is a midpoint, E is a midpoint, and F is a midpoint because it has all of those congruencies. So if I were to first look at side DE is going to be parallel to side CB. Because remember, it's always parallel to its third side. So then side AB is going to be parallel to DF. So AB is parallel to DF. And lastly, we can say that side AC is parallel to side EF. So AC is parallel to EF. So we know a lot of parallel information based on all of those midsegments. Okay, this one says, in triangle PQR, L, M, and N are midpoints. So before we go any further, I'm just going to make some marks. If L is a midpoint of PQ, those are congruent. If M is a midpoint of QR, those are congruent. And if N is a midpoint of PR, those are congruent. It then says that the distance from P to R, which is this whole thing, is 46. The distance from P to Q, which is this whole thing, is 40. And the distance from L to N, right here, is 17. And I need to find all other missing links. So, a couple of things. If the distance from P to R is 46, then the distance from P to N is half of that. So then I know that this is 23 and 23 because those have to be congruent, so that's half of it. Same thing if P to Q is 40, then these two are both 20 because they have to be congruent. Now, if P to Q is 40, then N to M, its parallel midsegment, has to be half of that, so that is 20. If P to R is 46, then its parallel midsegment L to M has to be half of 46, which is 23. You'll notice a lot of numbers are repeating right now. Then for the last one, if L to N is 17, then Q to R has to be twice as long, and so that means that the whole thing here is 34, which also then means that individually these are each 17. So now I have the missing lengths of every single part of that triangle. Okay, last one. We can use the idea of midsegments are half as long to solve equations. So for instance, we know that this segment here is a midsegment because of these congruences. So this is a midpoint and this is a midpoint, which means that this length is half of this length. Now, I don't want to divide 19 in half, so I'm going to go the other way around. That this one, that side, is twice as long as this one. So you can do these equations in two different fashions. You could either divide the longest one by 2, or you can multiply the shorter one by 2, whatever is easiest for you. So for this particular one, I'm going to multiply my short side by 2, because again, I really don't want to have to deal with dividing 19 by 2. If they were both even numbers, I might. Okay, if I want to solve this, I'm going to distribute. So we have 12x plus 42 equals 19x minus 36. I'm going to subtract 12x from both sides, and I'm going to add 36 to both sides. So 42 plus 36 is 78, and 19 minus 12 is 7x. And if I divide 78 by 7, I get that x is either, you can either leave it as 78 sevenths because that does not reduce, or it's about 11.1.